It was early autumn when I decided to take a solo camping trip deep in the mountains. I had been hiking and outdoors enough to feel confident I could manage on my own, and I wanted a break from everything: people, work, constant noise. I drove until the asphalt ended and the road narrowed to a dirt track that twisted through dense forest. The sun was still high when I parked at a small clearing beside an old ranger sign warning of steep terrain and wildlife. I loaded my pack and began the hike in, the crunch of leaves under my boots echoing through the quiet woods. The trail was narrow and overgrown in parts, and the further I walked, the more it felt like the forest was closing around me. The trees grew thicker, and the sun started to filter through in streaks of golden light. I had a map and compass, and I checked them periodically, making sure I stayed on track. I had been planning this for months and had packed carefully: a tent, sleeping bag, stove, water filter, enough food for 3 days, a small first aid kit, a headlamp, and extra batteries. I felt prepared, or at least I told myself I did. I found a small flat area near a creek just as the afternoon sun began to fade. The sound of the running water was calming, and I decided it would be my campsite. I set up my tent and unpacked my gear, making sure everything was secure. I started a small fire using dry twigs I gathered nearby and boiled some water for dinner. The forest was alive with sound: the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, the occasional snap of a branch from an animal moving through the underbrush. It felt normal, peaceful even. As night fell, the woods changed. The sounds I had found comforting during the day became sharper, stranger. The wind shifted in unexpected ways, brushing against the trees and carrying faint, unfamiliar noises. Something about the darkness made every small sound stand out, each one demanding attention. I kept the fire going, but its glow only reached a few feet beyond my camp. Beyond that, the forest was black, deep, and unbroken. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of something moving outside the tent. It was subtle at first, a light rustling through the leaves, like a small animal. But then it stopped, and I realized the silence that followed was different from the usual quiet. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was heavy, almost expectant, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. My stomach tightened, and I grabbed the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the edges of my clearing, but I saw nothing. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, heavy and insistent. I decided to stay awake for a while, listening. The creek ran steadily, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called. That's all I heard. Slowly, I convinced myself it was nothing more than my imagination running wild, fueled by the isolation and darkness. I finally lay back down, keeping the flashlight close, but sleep didn't come easily. Every small crack, every rustle set my heart racing. I stayed alert, knowing I was alone and vulnerable. Morning brought relief but also new unease. My campsite seemed untouched, no sign of anything unusual, but my gear had shifted slightly, as though someone had brushed past it. I told myself it was nothing, probably an animal, but there was a feeling I couldn't shake, like someone had been near my tent. I packed up slowly, checking everything twice, making sure my supplies were secure. I stayed alert, scanning the tree line as I moved. I decided to follow the creek upstream to find a vantage point overlooking the valley. The forest was quieter than usual, the usual chatter of birds almost absent. I moved carefully, my boots sinking into the damp earth in places, keeping an eye on the shadows around me. That's when I noticed it, a figure just beyond the bend of the creek. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe a hunter who had started out early. But the shape didn't move like an animal. It stood upright, completely still. The trees partially hid it, but I could tell it was human-shaped, the outline of a person frozen there. My heart started pounding, and I froze. I couldn't make out any details, just the vague silhouette. I debated whether to investigate, but something in the stillness of the forest told me to stay put. I waited, watching, and eventually the figure vanished. No movement, no sound, just gone. It didn't walk away. It didn't run. It just disappeared. I decided not to linger and kept moving along the creek. Every step felt tense, every shadow suspicious. I reached a rocky overlook and took a long break, trying to calm myself. The view of the valley below was breathtaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been following me. The hair on the back of my neck stayed raised, and I checked my surroundings constantly. I returned to camp in the afternoon, and everything seemed normal at first glance. I refilled my water, prepared another meal, and double-checked my supplies. But then I noticed subtle signs that someone or something had been around. Small items I had left on the ground were moved, footprints in the mud that didn't match my own, and faint breaks in the underbrush where no animal tracks were visible. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a deer or raccoon, but the spacing and shape of the tracks didn't match. Night came again, heavier and darker than the first. I kept the fire large, keeping light in all directions. I slept lightly, only a few hours at a time, constantly alert to any sound. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the unmistakable feeling of eyes on me. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the clearing, but there was nothing, no movement, nothing visible at all. The stillness of the forest was suffocating. I spent the rest of the night awake, listening. The wind shifted, the fire crackled, leaves rustled, but nothing approached. By dawn, I was exhausted, but I had learned something important. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, preparation and awareness weren't just helpful. They were essential. I packed up quickly that morning, moving deliberately and quietly. I kept my senses sharp, scanning the trees constantly. I didn't take any unnecessary risks. The hike back to my car was tense, but nothing unusual happened. When I reached the truck and started the engine, the normal sounds of the forest returned. The wind, birds, distant insects. I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. Driving home, I reflected on the trip. There had been no supernatural events, no fairy tale horrors, just the unsettling presence of someone or something watching me. The experience left me with a new respect for the woods. I realized that isolation in the wilderness exposes you to real threats, from wildlife, terrain, and even the possibility of other humans. Planning and preparation can't eliminate all risks, but they make the difference between a safe trip and a nightmare. Since that trip, I've only gone camping in well-populated areas or during daylight. I've shared my story with a few friends, and they've all admitted they felt the same fear I did when alone in the forest at night. I still think about that figure by the creek and the footprints around my campsite. I'll never know who it was or what it wanted, but I know it wasn't a ghost or a storybook creature. It was real, it was human, and it reminded me that the woods are not empty, even when they seem silent. That weekend taught me to respect the wilderness in a way I never had before. It showed me how quickly a peaceful hike can turn tense, how isolation magnifies every sound and shadow, and how real fear doesn't need fantasy to exist. It was a trip I'll never forget, not because of the beauty of the mountains or the serenity of the forest, but because of the very real, human reminder that being alone in the woods carries risks you can't ignore. I still hike and camp, but never alone. I double-check my gear, I stay alert, and I respect the forest. Every time I see a dense line of trees or a quiet creek, I remember that weekend, and the memory keeps me cautious, aware, and alive. I worked as a counselor at a summer camp tucked deep into the hills of Southern California. It was the kind of place where the road slowly turned from pavement to dirt, then to gravel, then to something that felt more like a suggestion than a real road. Cell service dropped miles before the gate. Once you were there, the outside world felt far away, like it had been folded up and put in a drawer. The camp sat in a wide bowl of trees and brush, surrounded by ridgelines that rose steep and dark. During the day, it felt peaceful. Oak trees threw wide shadows. Dust hung in the air when kids ran between cabins. Lizards warmed themselves on flat rocks. But at night, the place changed. Sounds traveled farther. Shapes felt closer. The woods pressed in, even though nothing had physically moved. We were used to wildlife. Deer wandered through camp like they owned the place. Foxes cut across paths early in the morning, their tails low and quick. Coyotes howled almost every night, long and echoing, sometimes so close it felt like they were right behind the cabins. We had been warned about mountain lions. We never saw one, but fresh tracks showed up on trails from time to time, wide and clean in the dust. Knowing something like that was out there changed the way you listened to the dark. There were also spots at camp that just felt wrong. A bend in the creek where the water always smelled stale. A flat clearing uphill that never seemed to grow much grass. Rusted metal half buried in the soil that no one could explain. People said the land had been used long before the camp existed. Old foundations, broken tools, things like that. I never believed in ghosts, but I believed places could hold memories. Some places made your shoulders tighten for no clear reason. That night started normal. The air was warm but cooling fast. The sky was clear, stars sharp and bright above the tree line. I finished getting my campers ready for bed, walked through the cabin, checked sleeping bags, listened to the slow rise and fall of breathing. Once everyone was settled, I stepped outside. Another counselor stood near my cabin, and we were talking quietly, enjoying the rare moment of stillness. The camp was mostly dark. Only a few low lights glowed near the main path. The rest of the forest was black and deep. That was when Sadie came running past us. She was moving fast, not jogging, not walking, but full-on running. Behind her was her entire cabin of teenage girls, maybe 12 of them, all dressed head to toe in black. Hoodies, leggings, sneakers. They looked like a shadow spilling down the trail. Some were crying. Some were holding onto each other. All of them were panicked. Sadie's face was pale, eyes wide, breathing hard. She shouted something as she passed, but it didn't fully register. All I caught was the word ghost and the sharp edge of real fear. She didn't slow down. She herded them straight toward their cabin, moving like someone who just wanted distance between themselves and whatever was behind them. Sadie was not the type to overreact. She was calm, grounded, the kind of counselor who handled emergencies without raising her voice. Seeing her like that made my stomach drop. Whatever scared her had gotten through layers of logic and experience. About half an hour later, after things settled, Sadie came back to my cabin. The camp was quiet again. The woods felt closer than before, like they had leaned in while no one was watching. She explained what happened. Earlier that evening, she had taken her campers on a night hike. It was supposed to be fun. They had all dressed in black and pretended to be ninjas, moving quietly, joking, enjoying the thrill of being out after dark. The trail they took cut through a thicker section of forest, where the trees grew tighter and the ground dropped away on one side. On their way back, as they passed a particularly dark stretch of trail, they heard something. At first, it sounded like a small voice calling for help. Faint, far away, like it was coming from somewhere beyond the trees. It didn't sound urgent at first, just a soft, stretched-out sound, almost carried on the wind. Then they heard it again. Each time it came back, it changed. The tone warped. The pitch shifted. It still carried the shape of a child yelling for help, but it no longer sounded right. The sound dragged, twisted, like it was being pulled through something rough. It echoed in a way that made it impossible to tell where it was coming from. That was when panic set in. Sadie tried to stay calm, but when the sound came again, louder and wrong in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up, instinct took over. They ran. No one fell. No one stopped. They didn't look back. After hearing all this, Sadie and I made the decision to go check it out. Not because it felt like a good idea, but because it felt like our responsibility. If there was even a small chance someone was hurt out there, we had to know. We grabbed flashlights and walked toward the trail. The night felt colder now. The ground crunched under our boots. Every sound seemed sharper. Leaves shifting, insects clicking, our own breathing too loud. As we reached the darker section of the trail, the forest felt heavier. The trees blocked out what little light the stars gave. The beam of my flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the dark, and everything outside that beam felt like it was watching. Then we heard it. It did not sound like a child anymore. It was high-pitched, raw, and stretched thin. The sound ripped through the woods, bouncing off the hillside. It didn't come from one spot. It felt like it came from everywhere at once, rolling down the slope, filling the air. It had the rhythm of a cry for help, but none of the warmth or breath behind it. It was harsh, broken, and deeply wrong. My body reacted before my brain did. My chest tightened. My hands went numb around the flashlight. The sound crawled under my skin. I knew deep down that whatever was making that noise was not something we should be near. We did not go any farther. We turned and moved fast, not running, but not walking either. We kept our lights low, focused on the path, not wanting to see more than we already had. The sound followed us for a moment, then faded, stretching thinner until it disappeared into the trees. Once we reached the main part of camp, the feeling eased a little. Lights, cabins, the shape of human space pushing back against the woods. We told the story to anyone who would listen, trying to make sense of what we had heard. Some people laughed it off. Some people looked uneasy. A few went quiet and nodded, like they had heard something similar before. The rest of the night passed without incident, but sleep came slow. Every distant sound pulled me half awake. Coyotes, wind, branches shifting. My brain replayed that sound over and over, trying to fit it into something normal. The next morning, the camp director called a meeting. Everyone gathered in the main area, squinting in the early sun, coffee cups in hand. The mood was casual, but there was a reason for the meeting. We were told not to alarm the campers if they heard strange sounds at night. We were reminded that bobcats lived in the area. They were shy and generally harmless, but their calls could be unsettling. At night, their yelps were high-pitched, sharp, and often mistaken for children crying or screaming. As the explanation continued, everything clicked into place. The distance, the echo, the way the sound seemed to come from the hillside instead of one clear spot. The distortion, the pitch. I later looked it up. Bobcat calls can sound exactly like a child screaming for help. When carried through trees and hills, it can become something almost unrecognizable. Understanding it didn't erase how it felt. Knowing the source didn't change the fear my body had stored from that night, but it grounded it. It put the sound back into the natural world, where it belonged. The rest of the summer, our friends never let us forget it. Anytime a strange noise came from the woods, someone would glance our way. Smiles, raised eyebrows, quiet jokes. We took it in stride. Even now, I don't think about ghosts when I remember that night. I think about how wild places don't care about human expectations. I think about how the woods can turn familiar sounds into something terrifying. I think about how fear can take hold when you don't know what you're hearing. And I think about how sometimes the scariest moments come from very real things, doing exactly what they were meant to do, in a world that doesn't stop to explain itself. I camped at the bottom of a narrow valley in the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho on a backpacking trip that had already pushed me harder than I expected. The trail dropped fast that last mile, twisting down through loose rock and sharp switchbacks, until the walls closed in on both sides. The valley floor was flat enough for tents, but the rock walls rose steep and broken, like giant stacks of shattered stone leaning inward. It felt quiet in a way that wasn't calm, more like the kind of quiet you notice because it feels heavy. I chose my spot carefully, or at least I thought I did. I stayed away from the creek so I wouldn't deal with moisture or sudden water noise in the night. I avoided the biggest dead trees. I cleared small rocks and pine cones from the ground until it felt smooth under my sleeping pad. By the time I finished, my legs were shaking from the descent and my shoulders ached from the pack. I ate, drank, and crawled into my tent as the last light drained out of the valley. Once the sun dropped behind the rock walls, darkness came fast. Lying there, I noticed how sound worked in that place. Every small movement seemed to bounce. A distant crack of rock echoed and then faded. Wind slid along the stone and made low, uneven noises that came and went. I told myself it was normal mountain stuff. I'd camped in rough places before. Still, being boxed in on both sides made me feel small in a way I didn't like. There was no wide sky overhead, no long view, just walls. I fell asleep eventually, the kind of shallow sleep you get after a long day where your body is tired but your brain won't fully shut off. At some point in the night, I woke up suddenly, heart already racing before I even knew why. Then I heard it, a deep, sharp crack, like stones snapping under pressure. A second later came the sound of something heavy hitting something else, followed by another hit and another. It wasn't a single rock falling. It was many, big ones. The sound rolled down the valley and filled it completely. It wasn't fast at first. There were gaps between the impacts, long enough for my mind to catch up and understand what was happening. A rock slide, not the kind you see in movies where an entire mountainside gives way, but still big enough to matter, big enough to kill. The noise grew louder and closer. I could hear the rocks breaking branches and slamming into trees, which snapped with dull, thick sounds that didn't echo the same way stone did. The ground didn't shake, but the air felt like it was vibrating. Each impact seemed to land closer than the last. My body locked up. I lay there staring into the black fabric of my tent, my hands tight around my sleeping bag. My first thought was to run. Every part of me wanted to get up and move, to do something, but there was nowhere to go. It was pitch black. No moonlight reached the valley floor. Even if I burst out of the tent, I wouldn't be able to see the rocks, wouldn't know which direction they were moving or how fast. Running blind through uneven ground full of roots and rocks would almost guarantee I'd fall. Falling would mean being stuck in the open, unable to move, waiting for whatever came next. I thought about staying still, staying exactly where I was. The tent suddenly felt thin and useless, a piece of fabric pretending to be shelter. I knew it would do nothing if a boulder hit it. The thought sat heavy in my chest. I could hear the rocks tearing through brush now, closer still, the sounds stacking on top of each other until it felt like the whole valley was moving. Time stretched in a strange way. Seconds felt long enough to hold full thoughts, then snap back into panic. I realized there were no good options. Every choice had bad odds, running blind or staying put. I chose to stay. I pressed myself down into the ground, as if that could somehow make me smaller, less noticeable. I told myself that most of the valley floor would be mist, that rocks follow channels, that maybe I was off to the side enough. None of those thoughts felt convincing, but they were all I had. The noise reached what felt like its closest point. The impacts were sharp and heavy, close enough that I could imagine rocks flying apart when they hit. I held my breath without meaning to, my ears strained, trying to place the sound, trying to guess distance in the dark. I waited for the moment when everything would end, or when the noise would pass. Then slowly it did pass. The sounds moved away, down the valley or across it, impossible to tell. The crashes softened, spread out, and finally faded into small clicks and settling noises. Dust hung in the air, though I couldn't see it. I could smell disturbed earth and crushed plants, a dry, raw smell that made my nose itch. I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, listening. Every small sound made my muscles tighten again. A branch snapping in the wind sounded like another rock starting. My heart took a long time to slow down. When it finally did, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like exhaustion. Sleep didn't really come back. I drifted in and out, waking at every shift of wind, every distant noise from the valley walls. My mind replayed the sounds over and over, each time imagining them closer, imagining the wrong outcome. I kept thinking about how small the choices were in moments like that. You plan all day, you think you're careful, and then at night you're reduced to luck. When morning finally arrived, it came quietly. Light crept down the rock walls and filled the valley with a dull gray. Birds started moving. The place looked calm, almost peaceful, which felt wrong after the night. I got out of my tent slowly, my legs stiff, my body heavy like I hadn't slept at all. I walked around the campsite, looking for signs. I expected to see fresh scars, broken trees, smashed ground. There were none nearby. No crushed brush, no new rock piles. I walked farther, scanning the slopes and the valley floor. Still nothing obvious. Whatever had come down had either stopped far away or traveled along a path I couldn't see from where I stood. Could have been a quarter mile away for all I knew. That realization didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. It meant that all that fear, all that waiting, had been spent on something I couldn't even measure. I had no proof of how close it came, no way to know how much danger I was really in. Just memory and sound and the feeling of being trapped with no control. I packed up slowly, more carefully than usual. I kept looking up at the rock walls, tracing lines where stone might fall again. The valley didn't feel like a place to linger anymore. As I started climbing out, the walls opened little by little, and the sky came back into view. With every step upward, the pressure in my chest eased. I didn't tell myself it was no big deal. I didn't laugh it off. I accepted it for what it was. A night where I had been completely exposed to something powerful and random. Something that didn't care where I pitched my tent or how prepared I thought I was. I left the valley knowing I'd never forget that sound, or the feeling of lying still in the dark, hoping that luck had chosen me for once. I remember that night so clearly, even though it's been a few years. My friends and I had gone camping in a quiet area near the foothills, a place that was more open field than deep forest. The land had belonged to a local rancher once, but the fencing had long since fallen apart. There were rumors that some of his old cattle still wandered the hills and woods nearby, but I didn't think much about it. It was just supposed to be a relaxing weekend outdoors. Some hiking, a fire, and sleeping under the stars. We set up camp near a thin line of trees by a creek. The grass around the site was knee-high in places, mixed with wildflowers and weeds that brushed against our legs when we walked through it. The day had been hot and dusty, and by the time the sun dropped behind the hills, the air cooled fast. The smell of smoke from the campfire mixed with the faint earthy scent of damp soil and the sweet smell of the grass. After dinner, we sat by the fire for a while, talking quietly, listening to the crickets, the frogs by the creek, and the occasional rustle in the brush. It was peaceful. The stars were bright enough to see clearly without any flashlight, and the night sky looked endless. By around midnight, everyone started turning in. I stayed up a little longer, finishing a bottle of water and sitting by the dim coals until my eyes got heavy. That's when I realized I needed to pee. It wasn't a big deal. Normally, I'd just walk a short distance from the tents and take care of it behind a tree or bush, but the area around us was kind of open. The nearest thick brush was a little deeper into the trees, and the ground there sloped toward the creek. I didn't want to wake anyone or turn on a flashlight, so I decided to just walk quietly into the darker area of the trees. The fire behind me was just a dull orange glow when I left the campsite. The grass brushed against my legs as I stepped away, and I could hear the faint sound of water moving somewhere ahead. The night was so still that even my breathing sounded too loud. The moon was bright enough to see the outlines of the trees, and the air smelled sharp and cool. I walked about 50 feet away from the tents and stopped near a low bush that looked like enough cover. The ground was soft and uneven, and I could feel little twigs and damp dirt under my shoes. I took one last glance toward the campsite, saw the dark lumps of the tents barely visible behind the grass, and then turned my back to the trees. As I started to squat down, I noticed a faint sound somewhere off to my right. It wasn't close, maybe 50, 60 feet away, but it was heavy, not like a raccoon or small animal. It was a slow crunch, like something big stepping on dry leaves or sticks. I froze for a second, still halfway down, trying to figure out if it was one of my friends moving around. But the direction was wrong. It was coming from deeper in the woods, not from camp. I waited, holding still, trying to listen past the sound of my own heartbeat. Then the noise came again. A slow step. Another. Something was definitely moving. I stayed crouched there, too stubborn to go back, and just tried to hurry. But before I could finish, I heard the sound again. Closer this time. A sort of low, wet exhale followed it, like a deep snort through large nostrils. My stomach dropped. For a second I thought it was maybe a deer or even a horse, but there was something heavier about it. I turned my head slightly, trying to see without moving too much. My eyes adjusted, and I saw a pale shape standing between two trees about 20 or 30 feet away. It was a cow. At first my brain didn't even register it properly because it just looked like a bulky shadow, but when it shifted its weight and stepped forward, I could see the shape of its head and the faint white patches on its body reflecting the moonlight. It was standing still, facing right toward me. I froze completely. It didn't make any sound, just stared. Its eyes caught a faint glint from the moon, and for some reason that tiny reflection made the whole thing feel 10 times more unnerving. It wasn't doing anything threatening, but there was something deeply uncomfortable about realizing that a large animal was silently watching me while I was squatting in the dark, pants down, completely exposed and vulnerable. It took another step forward. Its hooves made that soft crunch in the dirt again, and it tilted its head slightly, still staring straight at me. I could see its breath fogging faintly in the cold air. I don't know how long we stayed like that, maybe only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. My muscles started to ache from holding still, but I didn't dare move. My brain kept replaying every possible way this could go wrong. If it charged, if it panicked, if it suddenly got spooked by something else and bolted. Cows aren't usually aggressive, but out here, alone, in the dark, I didn't know what a half-wild one might do. Finally, I slowly stood up, keeping my eyes on it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The cow didn't move. It just kept staring, its head slightly lowered, like it was sizing me up. Then it made this low, deep sound, almost like a moan or groan, but drawn out, as if it came from deep inside its chest. It wasn't loud, but it sent chills through me. I started to back away, one small step at a time, making sure not to trip on anything. The cow followed me with its head, tracking every movement. Its ears flicked back and forth, and I could hear the faint swish of its tail. When I was finally about 20 feet away, I turned and walked faster, heading toward the glow of the dying fire. I didn't run, though I wanted to. Every few steps I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see it following me. But when I glanced back the last time, it was still standing in the same spot, watching. When I reached the tents, I could barely breathe. The fire had burned down to a few glowing coals, and the campsite was quiet except for the faint rustle of the trees. I sat by the fire pit, trying to calm down, and after a few minutes, I heard a soft sound in the distance again, the same slow steps through grass. I could see its shape moving along the edge of the trees, walking toward the open field beyond our camp. It stopped once, turned its head toward me again, and stood there for a moment. Then it turned back and kept walking, disappearing into the tall grass. The rest of the night I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every crack of a twig or rustle of grass made me think it had come back. The next morning, when we woke up, I saw the tracks near the trees. Clear hoofprints pressed into the soft dirt, leading right to the spot where I had been. They were deep and fresh, and the grass there was flattened in a wide patch. I didn't tell my friends what happened. It just sounded ridiculous. Who gets stared down by a cow in the woods at midnight? But every time I thought about how silently it had appeared, how close it had gotten, and how long it had just stood there watching, it made my skin crawl all over again. Later that day, while hiking near the edge of the field, I spotted more of them in the distance. 4 or 5 cows grazing together near a line of old wooden posts that might have been part of the ranch fence once. One of them was the same pale color as the one from the night before. It looked up from the grass, and for just a second, I swear its head lifted a little higher, like it recognized me. I walked back to camp without looking again. I laughed it off when I told the story later, but deep down, something about that moment never stopped bothering me. The way it had just stood there, silent, unblinking, in the middle of the night. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Maybe it wasn't anger or curiosity. Maybe it was just confusion or territorial instinct. But the way those eyes locked onto mine while I was completely vulnerable in the dark, it felt human. Ever since then, I can't go camping without scanning the edges of the trees before I go to sleep. And when I get up in the middle of the night to pee, I never go far. Because every time I step into the dark, I can still picture that cow, standing there motionless in the trees, staring at me like it understood something I didn't. I've spent a lot of time camping, enough that I'm usually calm about the normal sounds of the woods. Wind, branches snapping, animals moving around at night. Most of that fades into background noise once you've been out there enough. But there are a few moments that stay with you, moments that hit you so suddenly and so quietly that your body reacts before your brain has time to catch up. 2 of those moments involved nothing more than animals doing what animals do. And both scared me more than anything else I've ever experienced outdoors. The first time was with my buddy. We'd driven out late in the afternoon to a stretch of public land we hadn't camped on before. It wasn't deep forest, more like rolling hills with scattered trees and open clearings. We didn't really scout the area properly. By the time we parked and started unloading gear, the light was already fading. The sky was that dull purple-gray color that tells you night is coming fast. We decided to keep it simple and just hang our hammocks between two solid trees near the edge of a clearing. It felt quiet and calm. No signs warning about livestock, no fences nearby, nothing obvious to make us think twice. We were tired, a little lazy, and confident enough to think it didn't matter. Setting up hammocks in the dark is never ideal. Headlamps help, but they flatten everything into weird shadows. Depth is hard to judge. We tied straps around tree trunks, adjusted sag, clipped carabiners, and hung our tarps overhead. The ground beneath us felt uneven but firm. The air smelled like grass and dirt, and there was a faint animal smell that I barely noticed at the time. It didn't feel threatening, just rural. By the time we were done, it was fully dark. We ate a quick, quiet meal and climbed into our hammocks. I remember lying there and listening to the night settle in. The wind brushed the tarp softly. Somewhere far off, something moved through tall grass. I didn't think much of it. I fell asleep faster than I expected. When I woke up, it was light out, but not bright. That early morning light that feels flat and pale, like the world hasn't fully turned on yet. My eyes opened slowly, and for a second, everything felt normal. The hammock cradled my body. The tarp above me blocked most of the sky. I could hear my buddy shifting slightly in his hammock nearby. Then I turned my head. There was a cow's face right next to me. It wasn't inches away, but it was close enough that I could see details I never expected to see that early in the morning. The coarse hair around its nose, the moisture on its nostrils. One large, dark eye staring straight at me, unblinking. Its head was angled slightly, like it was curious but not alarmed. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It felt unreal, like my mind was still halfway dreaming. Then it clicked all at once and my stomach dropped hard. I was lying in a hammock, suspended off the ground, wrapped in fabric, with no easy way to move quickly. And there was a full-sized cow standing right next to me. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Slowly, I shifted my eyes past the cow's head and realized it wasn't alone. There were at least 2 more cows standing just behind it, and further back, spread out across the clearing, were several more shapes. A small group, maybe a dozen in total. They were all just standing there, quiet, watching. There was something deeply unsettling about how silent they were. No chewing, no lowing, no shuffling, just stillness. Their presence felt heavy, like the space around them was full. I became painfully aware of how vulnerable I was. One sudden movement from them, one startled step, and a cow could easily bump the hammock, knock me sideways, or crush gear beneath me. Not out of aggression, just size and weight. After what felt like a long time, but was probably only a few seconds, I slowly shifted my body. The hammock creaked slightly. The cow closest to me reacted instantly, lifting its head and stepping back. The others followed, backing away as a group. Not panicked, just cautious. My buddy started moving too, and that was enough. The cows turned and walked off toward the far side of the clearing, their hooves making dull thuds in the grass. Within a minute, they were gone, melting into the landscape like they'd never been there at all. Once they were out of sight, my body finally released all the tension at once. My hands were shaking. My mouth felt dry. I sat there for a while, just breathing, letting the adrenaline wear off. In daylight, it seemed almost funny. Just cows. Harmless, curious animals. But the shock of waking up to one staring at me from arm's length away was something I didn't forget easily. It made me realize how little control you really have out there when you're asleep. The second experience was worse. That time, I was alone. I'd gone out for a solo overnight trip in a more wooded area. Taller trees, thicker underbrush, fewer open spaces. I picked a spot a short distance off a trail, far enough to feel secluded but not so far that I'd be lost if something went wrong. I took my time setting up, making sure everything was solid. Hammock hung just right, tarp angled properly, paracord lines staked out carefully in all directions. By nightfall, My camp looked like a web of thin lines stretched between trees and the ground. Functional, but definitely something an animal could get tangled in if it blundered through. I spent the evening lying in my hammock, watching the trees sway gently overhead. The forest felt alive but calm. Bugs buzzed. Leaves rustled. Nothing unusual. At some point in the night, I woke up without really knowing why. That half-awake state where your body knows something has changed, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. I lay there, staring up at the dark shapes of branches and leaves, listening. Then I heard it. A soft sound. A single step. Close. Not rushing. Not heavy like a bear. Just deliberate. My heart rate jumped. Slowly, I turned my head to the side. There was a deer standing right next to me. It was huge. Bigger than I expected, even though I knew deer could get large. Its body filled the space beside my hammock, and its antlers stretched wide and tall, branching out like twisted tree limbs. Its head was turned slightly toward me, and its eyes reflected faint light, locking onto mine. I felt completely trapped. I couldn't sit up quickly without risking swinging the hammock or hitting the tarp. I couldn't stand without dropping straight down into the mess of cords and stakes beneath me, and I didn't know what the deer would do if I startled it. My mind raced through every possibility. If it panicked and jumped, those antlers could catch on a line. If it thrashed, it could tear everything down. If it kicked or twisted, I could get hit without it even meaning to hurt me. The deer stood there, tense but not moving. Its ears flicked slightly. I could see the muscles in its neck tighten. It felt like both of us were waiting for the other to make the first mistake. Time stretched out. My breathing was shallow. My body felt frozen, like I'd been glued into the hammock. Then, without warning, the deer seemed to realize what it was looking at. His head jerked back slightly. His body shifted, and then it exploded into motion. Took off so fast it barely made a sound at first. Then came the crashing, branches snapping, leaves tearing, the heavy thud of hooves pounding into the ground as it bolted deeper into the woods. The noise faded quickly, swallowed by distance and trees. I stayed exactly where I was for a long time after that. I didn't move. I didn't get out. I just lay there, heart racing, listening to the forest slowly return to normal. Eventually, the adrenaline faded. The night sounds came back, but something had changed. The woods felt closer, more real, less forgiving. By morning, everything looked ordinary again. No damage, no tangled lines, just a quiet campsite in the woods. I packed up carefully and left early. Those 2 moments taught me something important. The outdoors doesn't need monsters or anything unnatural to be terrifying. All it takes is waking up and realizing that something large, powerful, and unpredictable is standing right next to you while you're completely exposed. Even harmless animals can become deeply frightening when you're caught off guard and defenseless. I still camp. I still use hammocks. But I pay attention now. I look for signs. I think about where I'm sleeping and what might wander through while I'm not looking. And every time I wake up in the woods, before I relax, I check my surroundings. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't being hunted. It's being watched. I will get buried for this, but I have never gone camping or walked into the woods at night since this trip. It was late spring when it happened. School had given us a 5-day break, and a group of us decided to use it to get out of town. North Georgia felt safe to us. It was close, familiar, and popular enough that we assumed nothing truly bad could happen out there. There were 5 of us total. 2 guys, 3 girls. I knew everyone well enough to trust them with my life, which is probably why I ignored so many warning signs. We didn't plan this like some careless weekend trip. My buddy and I had both spent time outdoors before. He had military experience and treated the whole thing seriously. We packed a big 10-person tent even though there were only 5 of us. We brought cots, a propane stove, extra fuel, lanterns, a portable shower, water filters, medical supplies, and enough food to last longer than the trip itself. Everything was organized and checked twice. It felt responsible, felt safe. We left Wednesday afternoon and drove until the road thinned into a small mountain town. We parked the truck there, locked it up, and started hiking in. The first few miles were normal. Birds, bugs, distant wind moving through trees. The trail was clear enough to follow without much effort. I remember thinking how peaceful it was and how stupid people sounded when they talked about being scared of the woods. That feeling didn't last. About 4 or 5 miles in, we stepped into a wide clearing with a small lake in the center. It wasn't huge, just a still body of dark water surrounded by trees. The moment we entered the open space, everything stopped. Not slowed, not faded. Stopped. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even the clouds above seemed frozen. It was so sudden that it felt physical, like pressure in my ears. My buddy and I both reacted the same way without looking at each other. We reached for our handguns, not out of fear but instinct. Silence like that usually means something higher up the food chain is close. Georgia has coyotes, bears, and mountain lions, even if people don't like to admit it. I scanned the treeline slowly, trying not to show how tense I was. That's when I saw her. She stood at the far edge of the clearing, right where the trees thickened again. She was far away, maybe 150 yards, but clear enough to see her shape. She looked like a woman standing still, facing toward the water. She wasn't waving or calling out. She wasn't moving at all. I assumed she was a local who lived nearby or maybe another camper who had wandered off trail. We didn't stop. We walked along the edge of the water and headed back into the trees. I glanced over my shoulder one last time before the woods swallowed us again. And she was gone. Completely gone. The forest noise returned the moment we crossed back under the canopy. Like someone flipped a switch. We didn't talk about it. We made camp a couple miles later as the light started to fade. The ground was flat enough, close to water, and sheltered by trees. We set everything up quickly. The big tent went up, the cots went inside, the fire was built. Once the work was done, we relaxed. We ate, drank a few beers, and let the day drain out of us. Later that night, while the fire burned low, the woods went quiet again. Not dead silent like before, but muted, heavy. It made the air feel thick. I noticed it without fully registering it at first. Then it hit me all at once, like remembering something important too late. By morning, the propane tank was empty. The valve was open. The stove had never been lit. No one admitted to touching it. There was no smell when we woke up, which meant it had been leaking for hours while we slept. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The second morning, things were missing. A lantern that had been left by the fire pit. A sweatshirt one of the girls had left on a folding stool. We searched the immediate area and found nothing. No torn fabric. No scattered food. It didn't look like animals. We told ourselves it was raccoons or our own forgetfulness. Friday, we followed the river upstream looking for a waterfall someone had mentioned online. It was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence came back suddenly, pressing down on everything again. My buddy noticed it at the same time I did. We both slowed. At the top of a hill beside the river, through the trees, I saw her again. Same place, same stillness, same outline. She wasn't closer this time, but she wasn't farther either. She didn't move. She didn't hide. She just stood there like she had been waiting. My buddy went up the hill alone and came back later. The woman was gone. We found the waterfall and spent time there, forcing ourselves to relax. We told ourselves we were overthinking things, being tired, being jumpy. When we got back to camp, our gear had been disturbed. Bags shifted. Food containers moved. Nothing destroyed. Nothing stolen that mattered. Just enough to let us know someone or something had been there. That night, the silence came back worse than before. I woke up before dawn, fully alert, with the feeling that I was being watched. The forest was completely still. No wind, no insects, nothing. I stayed awake until the sky started to lighten, listening to my own breathing, afraid that even that sound was too loud. We packed up at first light. No breakfast, no delays. The hike back felt wrong. The woods stayed quiet the entire time. Too quiet. At least twice I thought I saw movement between the trees. A shape, a figure that stayed just out of focus. We avoided the lake without saying why. When we reached the truck, The noise came back all at once. Birds, wind, life. I have never been so relieved to hear traffic. Only after we were back on the road did everything come out. Every one of us had seen her at some point. Standing, watching, never close enough to confront, never far enough to dismiss. None of us could describe her face. When we tried, our minds slid past it like it wasn't there. I don't know who she was. I don't know if she followed us, lived out there, or just crossed our path at the wrong time. But I know this. Silence like that doesn't happen without a reason. And whatever caused it knew we were there the entire time. I don't go into the woods at night anymore. I don't camp. I don't hike off trail. Not because of fear, but because I learned something out there. Some places don't want you around. And if you stay long enough, they make sure you understand that. I will get buried for this, but I have never gone camping or walked into the woods at night since this trip. It was late spring when it happened. School had given us a 5-day break, and a group of us decided to use it to get out of town. North Georgia felt safe to us. It was close, familiar, and popular enough that we assumed nothing truly bad could happen out there. There were 5 of us total. 2 guys, 3 girls. I knew everyone well enough to trust them with my life, which is probably why I ignored so many warning signs. We didn't plan this like some careless weekend trip. My buddy and I had both spent time outdoors before. He had military experience and treated the whole thing seriously. We packed a big 10-person tent even though there were only 5 of us. We brought cots, a propane stove, extra fuel, lanterns, a portable shower, water filters, medical supplies, and enough food to last longer than the trip itself. Everything was organized and checked twice. Felt responsible, felt safe. We left Wednesday afternoon and drove until the road thinned into a small mountain town. We parked the truck there, locked it up, and started hiking in. The first few miles were normal. Birds, bugs, distant wind moving through trees. The trail was clear enough to follow without much effort. I remember thinking how peaceful it was and how stupid people sounded when they talked about being scared of the woods. That feeling didn't last. About 4 or 5 miles in, we stepped into a wide clearing with a small lake in the center. It wasn't huge, just a still body of dark water surrounded by trees. The moment we entered the open space, everything stopped. Not slowed, not faded. Stopped. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even the clouds above seemed frozen. It was so sudden that it felt physical, like pressure in my ears. My buddy and I both reacted the same way without looking at each other. We reached for our handguns, not out of fear but instinct. Silence like that usually means something higher up the food chain is close. Georgia has coyotes, bears, and mountain lions, even if people don't like to admit it. I scanned the treeline slowly, trying not to show how tense I was. That's when I saw her. She stood at the far edge of the clearing, right where the trees thickened again. She was far away, maybe 150 yards, but clear enough to see her shape. She looked like a woman standing still, facing toward the water. She wasn't waving or calling out. She wasn't moving at all. I assumed she was a local who lived nearby or maybe another camper who had wandered off trail. We didn't stop. We walked along the edge of the water and headed back into the trees. I glanced over my shoulder one last time before the woods swallowed us again. And she was gone. Completely gone. The forest noise returned the moment we crossed back under the canopy. Like someone flipped a switch. We didn't talk about it. We made camp a couple miles later as the light started to fade. The ground was flat enough, close to water, and sheltered by trees. We set everything up quickly. The big tent went up, the cots went inside, the fire was built. Once the work was done, we relaxed. We ate, drank a few beers, and let the day drain out of us. Later that night, while the fire burned low, the woods went quiet again. Not dead silent like before, but muted, heavy. It made the air feel thick. I noticed it without fully registering it at first. Then it hit me all at once, like remembering something important too late. By morning, the propane tank was empty. The valve was open. The stove had never been lit. No one admitted to touching it. There was no smell when we woke up, which meant it had been leaking for hours while we slept. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The second morning, things were missing. A lantern that had been left by the fire pit. A sweatshirt one of the girls had left on a folding stool. We searched the immediate area and found nothing. No torn fabric. No scattered food. It didn't look like animals. We told ourselves it was raccoons or our own forgetfulness. Friday, we followed the river upstream looking for a waterfall someone had mentioned online. It was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence came back suddenly, pressing down on everything again. My buddy noticed it at the same time I did. We both slowed. At the top of a hill beside the river, through the trees, I saw her again. Same place, same stillness, same outline. She wasn't closer this time, but she wasn't farther either. She didn't move. She didn't hide. She just stood there like she had been waiting. My buddy went up the hill alone and came back later. The woman was gone. We found the waterfall and spent time there, forcing ourselves to relax. We told ourselves we were overthinking things, being tired, being jumpy. When we got back to camp, our gear had been disturbed. Bags shifted. Food containers moved. Nothing destroyed. Nothing stolen that mattered. Just enough to let us know someone or something had been there. That night, the silence came back worse than before. I woke up before dawn, fully alert, with the feeling that I was being watched. The forest was completely still. No wind, no insects, nothing. I stayed awake until the sky started to lighten, listening to my own breathing, afraid that even that sound was too loud. We packed up at first light. No breakfast, no delays. The hike back felt wrong. The woods stayed quiet the entire time. Too quiet. At least twice I thought I saw movement between the trees. A shape, a figure that stayed just out of focus. We avoided the lake without saying why. When we reached the truck, the noise came back all at once. Birds, wind, life. I have never been so relieved to hear traffic. Only after we were back on the road did everything come out. Every one of us had seen her at some point, standing, watching, never close enough to confront, never far enough to dismiss. None of us could describe her face. When we tried, our minds slid past it like it wasn't there. I don't know who she was. I don't know if she followed us, lived out there, or just crossed our path at the wrong time. But I know this. Silence like that doesn't happen without a reason. And whatever caused it knew we were there the entire time. I don't go into the woods at night anymore. I don't camp. I don't hike off trail. Not because of fear, but because I learned something out there. Some places don't want you around. And if you stay long enough, they make sure you understand that.